Everyone. Okay, just getting set up. My tripod's having this little slanting issue. I'm Carrie for Gluten's Sake, and I'm so excited that I have an interview with Heather, who's just popping on. Yay. Okay. Hello, Michelle. Hi, Taylor. All right. Oops. Just going to invite Heather on. Come on, iPhone. There we go. All right. And then we're going to get started. It's really early here. Is it connecting? All right. It's going. It's going. Hi, Michelle. Hi, Julie. How's it going? Okay, it's connecting. Connecting.
Yay!
Yay!
Let me fix the sun. There we go. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Fabulous. So where are you at?
I'm in Vietnam right now, so it's
Okay, I was thinking you were like in Chicago.
no, yeah, Vietnam. So it's what day is it? Wednesday morning.
Okay. So when you were like, I am going to take a nap and I'm gonna get some sleep, I'm thinking, wow, okay, she must have stayed up really late. I did not realize that you were in Vietnam. So
Yes, totally
thank you
different
for
time zone.
accommodating me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. I'm an early bird, so it's
Okay.
6 a.m.
All right. Well, I usually start around 5 a.m. It's been a long day for me. When you and I originally orchestrated this interview, I had an event that I had committed to, and I didn't realize that it was in San Diego and not Irvine, which in California, going to San Diego is a little bit of a challenge, especially if you're like on a time frame that you have to meet. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm just gonna have to pull over to the side of the road and do a live on the side of the five if I am in a parking lot. But luckily, the gods aligned and traffic opened, and I was able to get here in enough time. So it's all good.
It's all good, and
It
it's
is all
always,
good.
we can always make these things happen. I love it.
Absolutely. That's the beauty of the virtual world, right? You and I get to have a conversation from these completely different areas, and we wouldn't have otherwise had that opportunity if it weren't for things like Instagram Live and Facebook Live and Skype and FaceTime. So, as much as
Exactly.
they annoy me because they consume so much of our lives, they're still, a blessing to have the ability. We just have to kind of figure boundaries out to make it all work.
I couldn't agree more. Yay.
Yeah. So you're gluten free.
Yeah, so okay, so lots of people are jumping on. Hey, okay, so yes, I'm gluten-free, celiac, been celiac for
Okay.
eight years now.
Okay.
Yeah, so why don't we start? You can just introduce yourself, tell people a little
Yeah.
bit about you. I love that you're a dietitian, so yeah.
Awesome. So my name is Heather Duranja, better known as Nutrition Vixen. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist. I got my undergrad in dietetics, started practicing, and then ended up getting my master's in multidisciplinary health communication. So it's really understanding the psychology of behavior and what motivates individuals to want to make change, why they have so much difficulty with making change. The bottom line is we all have a general knowledge in terms of what equivalates to healthy and what doesn't, but most of us have a lot of barriers that stand in the way with us being able to implement those kind of choices on a regular basis. And so for you and I, we have a little bit more of a challenge because physiologically we have to be on point when it comes to choices that we make, because if we don't, then we really suffer the consequences. So for me, I decided to become a registered dietitian many years after I got diagnosed with a kidney disease that acts like an autoimmune disease. So that was a big wake up call for me. I started urinating blood one morning after I had a really bad a viral respiratory infection. I knew something was wrong. I didn't think that was normal.
Yeah.
And so, with a lot of testing and biopsies, it came back that I had a disease called IgA nephropathy. and my immune system is always activated. My body can't differentiate certain proteins that my body is made of and proteins that my body ingests. So as I've gotten older, I have started developing a lot of food issues. And so for me, gluten is not my problem. It's wheat in general. They can't differentiate which of the 20,000 different wheat variations there are when it comes to the protein. I just know it's specifically not gluten. However, gluten is a component of wheat. So I have to avoid all wheat, which makes it, really, really challenging. So for people like myself and you, there is a reason that we having that in our diet, and it can really be a challenge. Today I was on a college campus doing an event for this awesome company Pedal. They it's a gluten-free sparkling botanical beverage. It's so delicious. So anyway, it's a real challenge because I look around at all the food vendors and I'm like, yeah, no, there is absolutely nothing I can get. And so I have to always be prepared unless I want to really suffer the consequences or put myself in a situation where I'm starving to death. And then when I do have access to food, it's like, well, I'm so hungry. I'll just eat this one cracker. It won't be the end of the world. And then 9 days later, I'm still suffering. So that's an unfortunate consequence. So for me, it's dairy, it's wheat and casein proteins. Any of the wheat proteins, can't differentiate which one. And then also chickpea. So if we think about like healthy foods, that eliminates most of my options when it comes to going out to eat. So I've had to really perfect understanding how to order based upon those restrictions and still be able to enjoy the food that I'm eating, as well as live a life and be able to, have a social life and things of that nature.
Yeah.
So that's how I got where I'm at. So it was about probably 4 or 5 years ago when I had to start transitioning and eliminating gluten as well as the dairies and the chickpeas. And it's made a huge difference in terms of my immune system response, which has been a beneficial thing.
So when you initially became a dietitian, you did not have any of these issues.
I did not. They might have been prevalent, but with stress, compromised gut health, and lack of sleep, and then having the autoimmune kidney disease, the combination of all of those things together were a perfect storm to allow, basically put my immune system in a place where it started to reject certain food components, the proteins of certain food components.
I'm so fascinated by like what triggers an autoimmune response in people. Like I read this really interesting article maybe last year if I could find it, but it was so fascinating on trauma and how trauma, really can cause autoimmune disease responses, and it makes so much sense, right? Like your body is under all this stress. The stress has to go somewhere. But it's just fascinating to think about like what caused it in people, and we'll never know the full extent, but
Well, we all have the genetic markers for autoimmune disease to present themselves. It really is more about creating the perfect environment in order for it to say, hey, I'm here and I'm not going away. So unfortunately for me, at the age of 18, when I got this horrific respiratory infection, the genetic factors, the DNA of this disease were already there, but the stress from the viral infection allowed for those genetic markers to mutate and present the autoimmune issue. So, it's the same thing with cancer. We all have the ability to develop these chronic diseases, autoimmune diseases, cancer, but it really is a lot of it does have to do with environment. And when I say environment, that doesn't just mean like the home that we're living in. It means everything: our mind, our body, and our spirit, in terms of how aligned are we, how much balance do we have. When I was in my, I think I was in my maybe maybe it was mid 30s, I had gotten diagnosed with cancer. So I had contracted what's called HPV. My body could not fight it off because of having this IgA nephropathy, this autoimmune issue that was constantly prevalent. My body could not fight the virus off. Most people can't. Well, unfortunately for me, it went into full blown cancer. And so at that time when I had got diagnosed, I was really angry. I was like, wait, I've got the nutrition, I've got the exercise, like I'm the dietitian. How does this happen to me? And that was really when I had to expand my toolbox and really dive in and understand sleep, stress management, and gut health, and how all of those are the big factors in terms of how well your body responds to the nutrition and the exercise. From a physiological perspective, do we have balance? Is it in alignment? If we're lacking sleep, if we're lacking, you know, stress management, that typically has a major impact on our sleep schedule. So when our body is in a compromised place, it starts throwing up these flags and saying, hey, look, chick, I know you're really motivated. I know you got a lot to do, but here's the deal. I need sleep. I have to rest and repair, and you aren't allowing me to do that. Therefore, I'm going to have to throw out some big boulders to slow you down, because if not, you're going to end up, you know, dead or with much more severe circumstances. So for me at that time, I remember joking with the gynecologist when she was like, so here's the deal. We're going to have to do surgery and remove most of your cervix. And I remember looking at her and saying, well, you know, I guess I have to count my blessings. At least the HPV went this route instead of the genital herpes, because I would have been stuck with that forever. Like that would not have gone away. So that would have been much more traumatic. But with that, it was an awareness, an epiphany that made me realize, hey, it's not just about nutrition. It's not just about exercise. The picture is so much bigger and more simplistic than we actually would like to give it credit for. But if we can just check some basic boxes, am I getting appropriate sleep? Am I getting adequate nutrients? Am I staying hydrated? Am I managing my stress? We can really prevent a lot of these components from happening, these diseases. Especially women tend to be way more prevalent for autoimmune disease than men. And if you think about women's role in society, we like to wear a lot of hats, and we're super stubborn, and we never want to ask for help. So when you combine all of that together, it really is, right? It's like, hey, come get
Yeah.
me, diagnose me with something, because clearly I don't get it. I think I can, you know, do it all. And unfortunately we can't. So
Well, and
yeah,
that's such a good point, and I'm sure you work with clients around this, right? Like, not only do you have to watch all those things in general, but especially after you've developed an autoimmune disease, right? Like, you are
absolutely.
so much more apt to get another one. We all know that, or people,
Absolutely.
people
Typically,
are talking about that more now.
right. Especially like with celiac disease, not only are you at a higher prevalency of developing other autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and fibromyalgia, but then you also have diseases like osteoporosis that are, you're in a pool for way more prevalence. So when you get that initial diagnosis, the battle has just begun. Like, you really have to become your healthcare advocate, and you have to invest yourself and understand. Most of us are in denial, right? Like, we're like, yeah, whatever. The doctor says I have this, but whatever. When my doctor When my doctor told me that I was looking at dialysis or kidney transplant within 5 years from when I had gotten diagnosed, I couldn't get health insurance. I just had a little baby. I was like, okay, tell me exactly how that's supposed to happen, because that's not an option in my world. So I had to be proactive. I had to, and I realized that a lot of people don't necessarily have the time, they don't have the motivation, maybe they don't have the resources available, which is why I went the route that I did, because I lived it firsthand. I know the benefits of it. I also know the struggles. So, with all of that being said, I feel like for me as a practitioner, I can put myself in a client or patient's perspective and understand exactly what it is that they're dealing with, the fears. There's so many fears, right?
Sure.
It's really scary. Um, but then also know that there are tangible things that we can do that if we just set realistic expectations for ourselves, we can easily achieve a desirable outcome that's going to set us up for success long term. And most people, when they get a diagnosis, they become overwhelmed. They're filled with fear and panic. So they just either go into denial, or they just say, well, it's either denial or acceptance, right? But they're like, either I'm just denying that this is happening to me, or I'm accepting it. I'm not going to make any changes because I'm going to die anyway. So what point, what's the difference? And unfortunately, with something like celiac disease, there is no cure. Same thing with me. There is no cure. There's nothing I can do, but there are a lot of preventative measures that I can take that don't require me to put forth a ton of effort. It's usually just modifying and finding alternatives that work for me. Maybe they don't work for Jan, but they work for me. And so working with clients, I really try to help them identify changes that they can make, that they can stay consistent with, that still allows them to feel some sense of autonomy, that they're living life on their own terms. It's not being controlled by this disease. One of the things I like to tell my celiac patients specifically is, when you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And I have fallen on my face so many times when it comes to that. Just having a basic plan. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant or time takes up a ton of time or requires a lot of financial resources or resources in general. You just have to have a basic understanding. So,
Yeah. Well, and that's such a key to life. Like, I feel like I fortunately learned that really early on. Like, when I was in grad school, I was pretty poor and I cared about what I put in my body in general. So it was like, okay, if I want to eat, I'm going to have to meal prep, and I'm going to have to carry snacks with me, and I'm going to have food at all times so that I'm not eating out and spending all my money that I don't have.
right.
But it's the same thing that goes with having celiac, right? Like, you need to have snacks on you. You need to think ahead. You need to plan. You have to advocate for yourself. And it's all these things that, and I've been having a lot of conversations this month, and it's so great because what I continually say, and I know that you say the same thing, is like, you have to learn to advocate for yourself, even if it's not in your nature. Like,
Absolutely.
and it can be such an overwhelming thing for like maybe really shy people or people that aren't used to that, or feel
Right.
like the guilt, like I'm an inconvenience, I'm asking all these
Right.
questions. But at the end of the day, like, you need that life skill so that you can
Mhm.
go further in life, because no one else is going to care about your life the way that you do.
Absolutely. And one thing I like to remind clients and patients, I have a specific client in mind. She is a celiac patient and client, I should say. She had to have a really extensive eye surgery done a couple weeks ago. And so with her, there's been a lot of education around the stress management component. Um, she, prior to coming to me, she could not gain weight. She was a string bean. She had lost like over 30 pounds after being diagnosed with celiac, because part of celiac disease is malabsorption of nutrients. We have this chronically inflamed digestive tract. And so the visual that I like to give people is, we should have these nice finger-like projectiles that line our intestine, that allows for a lot of surface area to occur, for nutrient absorption to occur. And when you have celiac, it becomes more like a hardwood floor. And so we lose a lot of that surface area for nutrient absorption to be able to take place. So most of the nutrients are just flushing through our body and we have poor absorption, which ultimately results in many frequent bowel movements throughout the day, which are not something women specifically feel comfortable talking about, right? Typically, women are like, oh, we don't talk about our poop, like, ugh. And so, if you're a young person or an older person and you're having these frequent bowel movements and you don't know why, after you eat, you start having pains in your stomach, and then that typically results in, frequent bowel movements, usually very liquidy ones. Anyway, with this particular client, she lost a lot of weight. She couldn't gain the weight. Her body was just metabolizing her lean muscle in order to stay alive. And so she was an athlete prior. She was an athlete. And so it really bothered her to look in the mirror and see, these little stick thin legs and these stick thin arms and, the emaciation like in her face, her bones becoming so predominant. So that's when she finally reached out for help. Another problem she was having was her esophagus was finally closing, like it was constricting. And so now at this point, now it's even hard to swallow food, right? And so there were a lot of behavioral things that she was doing that were contributing to GERD. And one of the unfortunate side effects of acid reflux, years and years of having it, if it's not managed appropriately through lifestyle modification, it's going to lead to scarring tissue to develop from the acid eroding in the esophagus, which causes the circumference to tighten and narrow, become smaller. So once you get to that point, the only thing that you can really do is start having dilations. And I don't know if you've ever heard or seen a dilation, but that's where they take these tubes, they put you under, and they literally stretch your esophagus using different circumferences of tubes as they pound them down your throat. And this is something that you have to have done frequently in order to be able to swallow food appropriately, and pills and things of that nature. So anyway, she had this horrific eye surgery last week, and she wasn't really listening to me about the importance of managing her stress and getting appropriate sleep. She had had the surgery done once before, and then the body rejected the mesh tissue that they had put into the orbital. So she kind of had set an expectation for herself of what she expected the recovery to look like. And unfortunately, this situation was nothing like the first situation. So she was very frustrated because she had set an unrealistic expectation in terms of what that recovery looked like. And she was so pissed off about it. It was creating so much frustration that it was actually triggering a stress response in the body. And when you trigger that stress response, we have this brain gut axis that is connected and correlated, and it's going to result in the way that our body functions in terms of explosive bowel movements, a lot of gas, a lot of bloating. And when you're not getting the appropriate sleep and you have it combined with that stress response, it's going to make healing of the eye almost impossible, right? So last week we had to really have this coming to Jesus chat about why, number one, she has to let go of the expectation she had set based on her previous experience, because we're talking 8 years later, a lot of things have changed. Physiologically, things have changed. If you weren't taking into consideration the importance of managing the stress and the sleep prior to having the surgery, how do you think your body is going to respond to that post-surgery? And then how is that going to have an impact on the other physiological issues, such as celiac, that she already has? So
that's so interesting. I mean, it's all connected, right? Like, and I think more people are talking about it, or I hope. I mean, I'm just like privy to more, because it's also kind of like when you're wanting to find more information, you find more people, that whole phenomenon of like seeing, wanting a red car and then
the will appear. Right?
Yeah. Or like you want a red car and then all of a sudden you see red cars everywhere and like,
right.
But, I think the mind body connection and just all the things that you're talking about in terms of how everything is related, especially when you have an autoimmune disease that you just have to pay more attention to.
You do.
Like, you can't pretend that you're somebody else like that
Right.
doesn't live with an autoimmune disease. Like, you have to
Right.
take care of your body in a different way than somebody who doesn't have one.
Right. I think that for me, when I have conversations with clients who are interested in, making change, you have to find the value, you know? So specifically for this individual, she recently purchased a horse and she wants to be out with the horse. And so I had to explain to her that if she didn't take care of herself now and get the proper rest and stay hydrated and say no to work and all of the other people who need your time and attention right now, you're not going to be able to give the horse any time and attention because you're going to lose your eye. Like, the only outcome is your body is going to reject the implant. You're going to end up losing that eye. Now you are restricted to eyesight out of one eye, which is going to have, negative impact in terms of moving forward and the quality of life. So I think a lot of it is about finding the value, understanding emotionally what people connect their worth in terms of their life to. And if you can establish what that value is, it will help an individual to understand the investment that you have to make in order to improve that, whether it's education, whether it's time management, financial resources. There's a lot of different tools that can be utilized. You just have to figure out what that value is. And then from there, for me, my job is to help individuals identify where they're going to invest their energy and effort that's going to give them the biggest payoff in the long run. So
I love that. So, do you work with clients only in person? Do you work with clients online?
yeah, so most everything I do is virtual.
Okay.
I have niched down to specifically working with females who have autoimmune disease. So, being that I've lived it firsthand, I understand it. I'm a female, so I also understand a lot of the stipulations that come along with being a female. So, when it comes to like lifestyle, factors, I get that. But then women are also statistically much more prevalent to developing an autoimmune disease versus a male. So if the right male, if a male has the right pitch, I will sometimes entertain the idea. But for me, I really truly enjoy working with women.
Okay.
So that's kind of where my passion is. Yeah. So
Awesome.
everything I do is virtual. So
Cool.
again, the beauty of technology, I can work with someone in Vietnam. How crazy is
Yeah,
that, right?
I know the world.
It's crazy.
I'm just so grateful every day. I'm like, we live in the best time alive. I mean,
Right.
seriously, like
Yeah.
our grandparents would have killed for the opportunities that we have.
Right. I know. So on one note, my client that I was talking about who came to me because she was losing so much weight, she has successfully been able to put 14 pounds on in a year and be able to maintain that weight gain, which for her, that's a huge deal. That was like really seriously adding quality of life and years of life to her circumstance. So
That's
that's
huge.
really exciting. It is. It's really exciting. And
Yeah.
it's always fun to work with someone who needs to gain weight because everyone is so, obsessed with losing weight. It's always fun to get to take that approach and help someone gain weight appropriately.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I have a question for you. How long
Yes.
did it take for you to get diagnosed?
Honestly, I would say like close to 15 years
Yeah. So they
because,
say that the
yeah,
average is around 15 to 20 years to get diagnosed with having celiac disease. So I think personally that one of those barriers in terms of why we have such low diagnosis rates is because people aren't talking about it, right? If we're specifically targeting majority of women, um, it's at at a very young age when we first start having those tummy issues and our parents take us to the doctor or we complain to our parents. They're like, oh, it's because you had the licorice, or it's because you had some sort of sweet, or you've been running around playing and your stomach is upset. So we're constantly taught to dismiss the symptoms that are presenting themselves. And then, unfortunately, in the medical world, there's just a lot of lack of knowledge in terms of celiac disease and what actually quantitates a diagnosis. Um, so it can take years. My one client that I was mentioning, it took her over 20 years to finally be diagnosed. And once she got that diagnosis, it was a game changer because now she had the ability to make modifications that were going to be in her best interest. And so just having the knowledge of knowing this is what's going on is such a huge gift when someone is when someone is suffering with celiac disease. Millions of individuals are walking around without an actual diagnosis, questioning. They have really horrible relationships with their food because they don't understand exactly what it is that they're eating that's causing the problems. All they know is 30 minutes to 2 hours after they eat, they don't feel good. So it creates a lot of anxiety around making choices, which is really unfortunate.
I know it is. And I hope it's getting better. I think other countries are light years ahead of the US in terms of testing and all of those
Absolutely.
things. So I think that if the US catches up to that and starts screening, like there's a lot of
Right.
potential for,
I
people getting their needs met and understanding,
Absolutely.
diagnosis and getting diagnosed and all those things.
There is a phenomenal product that is available on the market. It's an in-home testing
Ooh.
kit. It's a finger prick. It's by a company called I Am Aware. Are you familiar with them?
Well, I've seen it going around. I mean, I have, because
Okay.
I'm not in the US, I haven't used it or anything. But yeah,
Okay.
it looks
So you can
great.
actually, yeah. So even people outside of the U.S. have access to this product. And if anyone wants information, I'm not correlated with them. I don't get any kind of revenue. I'm not sponsored or anything. It's just I think that this is an important tool that people need to have access to. So my doctor wanted to test me for celiac disease. Without having health insurance, celiac testing is thousands of dollars to do the blood work to be able to determine yes or no. So I know that I can't have wheat, so it's like I just need to avoid wheat, and I don't necessarily have to have the diagnosis of celiac. I just know that I have a problem and I need to avoid. So anyway, this company has these at-home testing kits. I want to say, don't quote me. I want to say that they were like definitely under $200, maybe like $125 to be able to have a product shipped to your home. You take a finger prick test, you put it back in the mailbox, you send it off, they test it, and then they can verify whether or not it's testing positive for the proteins that are, to determine whether or not you have celiac disease. And I think that if more people were aware that these options existed, it would reduce a lot of barriers from people actually getting the testing, whether it's the financial expense, having to go through your health insurance and paying the deductibles. A lot of people just don't have the time to make it to a lab in order to get their blood drawn. So they just keep putting it off, putting it off. So there's a lot of things out there that keep people from being able to do the testing to give them the information they need in order to improve their quality of life. So I really like the fact that this product was developed by a team of doctors that are based out of Chicago, where the celiac awareness testing facility is. So anyway, I think it's great that they're actually taking into consideration all of these barriers that people have of why they don't get the testing through labs or going through traditional, health insurance routes.
Yeah, that's a great resource. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So if anyone needs information, I'm happy to send the link. And the guy who's in charge there is awesome and can answer any questions anyone has.
Awesome.
So,
Well, thank you, Heather. This is so great. Where can people find you online if they're interested or have questions?
so they can either follow me on Instagram or Facebook at Nutrition Vixen. And then I also have a website. It's at nutritionvixen.com. I have a ton of freebies and things, resources, recipes. Majority of everything I do is gluten-free, dairy-free. So for people who have really restrictive diets, it's great resources. I also have a YouTube, so a lot of traveling that I do. I will document that and show, experiences like cross contamination and, just having really limited options and why that planning component is so detrimental if you want to stay safe. There's nothing worse than getting cross contamination, and the fun, exciting trip that you had planned is now spent, clutched over in excruciating pain and frequent trips in and out of the bathroom. It's not pleasant. It kind of just throws a little kink into the whole vacation or whatever the trip might be. So,
Yes.
well, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and say hello to all of your guests and have a chance
Yeah.
to talk about celiac and bowel movements and all that exciting stuff. So if
I
anyone has
appreciate
any
it.
questions, by all means, feel free to shoot me an email or DM me through one of the social media outlets, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you for getting up so early.
Yeah, no worries. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
Talk
All
to you
right.
soon.
Keep doing this. It's so important. I cannot thank you enough.
Yeah.
The little awareness spreads, it goes a long way.
Thank you.
All
Appreciate you
right. My
saying that.
best to you, Dal.
Okay. Bye.
Have a good one.
You
Bye
too.
bye.